In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how you can integrate MySQL database information into your Flash movies, and we're going to be using PHP to accomplish this. So I've drawn a little simple diagram here showing you how this is all going to work. So we're going to create a very simple MySQL database table with just some products. We're going to use PHP to call the database to read that data, and then the PHP file is going to create some XML, which we're then going to read into our Swift file. So once we get to this point to our Flash movie, it's going to be just like working with regular XML. And if you've seen the other couple of tutorials I've done on XML, that'll be very familiar to you. So this will be the new part, the PHP and the MySQL part. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a very simple database using MySQL. Okay, here we are, and we're at a tool called PHP MyAdmin. Now, if you're new to MySQL and PHP, the best place to get information is from your web hosting provider, because they will tell you how you can go ahead to set up PHP and to set up MySQL. So if you don't have, most hosting providers do support PHP and MySQL because they're both free open source tools, and they're the best in my opinion to work with. So once you've gone ahead and set up your database using your web host instructions, more than likely they're going to have PHP MyAdmin because it's kind of the default tool to use in order to administrate your MySQL databases. So I've created a new database called Brimlow_store. So we're going to create our table that's going to hold our products here. So it says create new table on database Brimlow store. So I'm going to call it products, and then it's asking you how many fields that you want to have in this table, and we're going to have 2. This is going to be a very simple database table. Then click go. Now it's going to create that new table. Now you can see here that it's asking us to set up those 2 fields, and let me move this over to there. Okay, so first thing we're going to need is a primary key. You always want to have this. It's an identifier for each, to make each row unique, and you need to have that. So I'm just going to call it ID, and then I'm going to make it an int data type. And again, if you want more detailed instructions on how to work with PHP MyAdmin, again, your web hosting provider probably will have that for you. So you want to make sure that it's always going to be not null because it's going to be a primary key. And then under extra, I'm going to select auto increment, which means that I don't have to give the ID field a value. It will automatically increment with each new row. And then see this radio button here, primary. I need to select that because this is going to be the primary key for our database table. Okay, so the second field is where we're actually going to hold our product name. So I'm going to call it product, and I'm just going to leave it as a varchar, which is basically string data. And then for length, I'm going to give it a maximum of 255, which will be plenty to hold our string. So that's basically all I need to do to set up the table. And if I click save, it says table products has been created. Okay, so now from this point, what I want to do is just add some data into the database. So I'm going to click on insert, and now here you can see I can add 2 rows here. And for the ID, like I said, I'm going to leave it blank because it's automatically going to start it at 1, and every time I add a new product, it's going to increment it. So I'm just going to add some products. So I'm going to say beach ball, and then down here, say lawn chair. And then I'm going to say after we do this, insert another row. Click go. So now it's inserted 2 rows, and now it's allowing me to do it again. So I'm going to say hammock, electric razor. Okay, let's add those. Now let's just add a couple more rows. Coffee machine and organizer. Kind of a weird store we're building, but so let's click go. Okay, now we've inserted those. Now let's take a look at what our database table looks like. Let's look at the data in it. To do that, we click browse, And now we can see here is our table with the information. You can see it's already put in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the ID field. This is our unique key, our primary key. And then here are our products in the database. So the next step, I'm going to show you how to create a PHP file that's going to read in these products and then create some XML, which will then be read into Flash. So let's go to our PHP file now. Okay, here we are, and I'm just in a plain text editor. I'm in Notepad+. I've just created a new document called products.php, and I've saved that into my working directory. So the first thing you do when you start any PHP page or PHP code is you start it with a PHP tag, which is an open bracket, question mark, and then PHP. So once we have that, now the first thing we need to do is to connect to our MySQL database. And when we connect, we're going to assign that connection to a variable so that we can later close that connection. So using PHP syntax, when you create a variable, you put a $sign in front of it. So I'm going to say link is equal to MySQL underscore connect. If you want to find out more about PHP and about the MySQL functions, you should go to php.net, which is the official PHP documentation site. If you just search for MySQL, you'll see all of the available functions and methods and properties. But to connect, we use the MySQL underscore connect method. So the first thing we do is we give it the location of our MySQL server. Now most of the time this is going to be localhost, but again you want to check with your web hosting company, look in their documentation. They'll tell you exactly what to put in here. Next thing you want to do is to put in your username for your database, which you'll also have set up through your hosting company. And I'm just going to call it, I'm not going to put in my actual login information here for obvious reasons. So then the next thing you want to do is to put in your password. So you'll put your password in like that, and then close this method call here. So now we're telling it to connect to the MySQL database on localhost with username of Lee and a password of password. Okay, so now once we've done that, now we need to tell it which database to select, because it's possible that you'll have multiple databases on your web host or on your MySQL server. So we say MySQL underscore select underscore DB, and then in here we tell it which database to select, and mine is called Brimlow underscore store. And close that like that. Okay, so now we've connected to the MySQL database, and then we've told it which specific database to select, which is the Brimlow underscore store. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is we need to build our query, and this is using the SQL query language. And again, just doing a search online, we'll find tons and tons of resources on how to do queries using SQL. So we're going to assign our query to a variable, and I'm just going to call it query is equal to, and then for our query it's just going to be probably the most basic SQL query you can do, which is select star, which is another word for another symbol for all. So select all from, and then give it the name of your table, and the table we just created is called products, and close that. So what this is going to do is we're going to say select all of the rows and columns from the products table. Okay, so we haven't actually executed this query yet. We're just holding it in this string variable. Now let's go ahead and actually execute it. When we execute it, we need to assign the results of the query to a variable. So I'm going to call it results is equal to MySQL underscore query. And now we give it the variable that's holding our query. Okay, so now we've built up our query just as a string, and then we call the MySQL query method and pass it this string. And then the results that come back we're going to hold in this results variable. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to start writing out our XML file. We're going to first write out the XML declaration at the top. And to write something out, we use the echo function. So we say echo, which is essentially just like saying print. Then in quotes, we're just going to write our XML declaration. And this you can copy from other XML you have. Version is equal to, and now any place that we have double quotes in here, we're going to need to escape them so that it doesn't think we're trying to end our string here. So I'm going to backslash, then put a double quotes, 1.0 backslash double quote, and then question mark close. Okay, now once we print this out, we actually want it to do a line break. So to do that, we do backslash n, which gives us a line break. And now we can go ahead and close this. Okay, so now we've printed out the first line of our XML file. Now the next thing we want to print out is the root element of our XML file. And we're just going to call that products. So I'm going to say echo, and then have it write out products. And then again, I want to do a line break and close that up. And again, if you need a very basic introduction to XML, you can look at the couple of XML tutorials I've done before. It'll give you a better idea of this type of structure. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to iterate through this results set and print out our individual XML nodes. So to do that, we use a while loop. We say while, and let me just write this out, then I'll explain it. Line is equal to MySQL underscore fetch underscore assoc, and then we give it the results variable. Okay, to quickly go through this, what we do is we call this MySQL underscore fetch underscore assoc, which is short for associative. It's going to take the results and return an associative array to this variable line that we're going to use to display the results. And again, go to php.net for a bigger explanation of this function. Okay, so now when we're in this while loop, I'm going to say echo, and then I'm going to create an item tag like that. And now we're going to concatenate. Now if we're in ActionScript, we'd have a plus sign here. In PHP, it's a period. So we use a period, and then we say line product. So again, we have an associative array here of all the rows in our table. And what I'm doing here is I'm printing out just the product column from this row. Okay, now let me put another period here. And now we're going to put a closing item tag. And then do a line break. Okay, let me close that. Like that. Okay, so let's go through this real quick. So we're going through the while loop, and we're calling this MySQL fetch assoc, and taking each row and holding it in this line variable. And then we're going through and we're writing out actually I forgot the closing tag here. Okay, so we're writing out our XML item tags here. Okay, so now once we have that, the last thing we need to do is we've opened our root tag here, and now we need to close it. We just need to say echo and then close the products tag. Okay, let's give it another line break. Okay, now the last thing we need to do is, since we've opened a connection to the database, you always want to close it after you're finished, so it frees up resources. To do that, you just say MySQL underscore close, and then we give it this link variable that's holding our connection. So we say link. And now we just close our PHP block. So we opened it this way, and we just close it with a question mark closing bracket. So I'm going to quickly walk you through this code one more time. So here we connect to the MySQL database, and we hold the connection in this link variable. Then we tell it which database to select, and we're using that store one. Now we build up our query here and just hold it as a string variable. We select all rows from products. Now we actually execute the query on the database and hold the results in this results variable. Here we print out the XML declaration, which is the first line needed in our XML file. Then we open with the root element for our XML called products. And here we iterate through each row of the database, and we write out an item tag with the actual product name, close the item tag. And then here we print out our closing root node, which is products. And then here we just close the connection to the database. So let me save that. So now let's go over to the browser. I'm going to load this up onto the server, and I'll show you when we call this PHP file what results we get. Okay, here we are in the browser, and I've uploaded my PHP file just to the root of my web server. So it's leebrumlow.com/products.php, and when I hit enter, we'll see what the results look like. Okay, so you can see it's printed out all the items in our products table. But if we view the source, we can see that it actually has created, let me pull this down, you can see it's actually created perfect XML. So here's our XML declaration, the opening products tag, and then all of our items. So this is now valid XML that we can use inside of our Flash movie. And what we're actually going to do is, when we're in Flash creating our XML object, we're actually going to give this as the URL to our XML file. And as far as Flash knows, this is just a static XML file. It doesn't know that we dynamically went out to the database and retrieved this data. It doesn't have to know that. So let's go over to Flash now, and I'll show you how to read in this XML. Okay, here we are inside of Flash, and this is basically going to be a recap because I've already explained in previous tutorials how to read in XML. But I've just created a locked actions layer, and I've created a layer called list here. And we're just going to drag out a list component onto the stage because we're going to use and populate this list box with the data from our XML file. Okay, so let me just give this an instance name. I'm just going to call it the list. Okay, so let's go and highlight the first keyframe of our actions layer and open the actions panel. Okay, so like always, I create a new XML object. So I'm going to say the XML, strict data type it to XML is equal to new XML. And again, we want to always call XML.ignore white. We want to set that property. Let me need an E in there. And you always want to set that to true, so that Flash ignores white space in your XML document. Okay, now we set up the onload event for our XML object. Equals function. Okay, so first we want to do is we want to get to the first child, that root node of our XML document, and we're going to assign to a variable. We're going to call it nodes is equal to this, which is referring to the XML object, dot first child. So this right here gets us to that root element, which is products. But then we want to assign all of the child nodes to this nodes array. So we say first child dot child nodes. Okay, so now this holds an array of all of our item tags. So now we're going to iterate through those using a for loop. For I equals 0, I is less than nodes dot length I++. Okay, so each time we come through here, we want to add a new item to our list component. So we say the list.add item. The first thing we send to it is the label, and to do that we say nodes I dot first child dot node value. So this goes to each time we go through the array, it's going to the item tag, and we're going to the first child, which holds the actual data, and we're taking the node value. Now for the data property of our list component, I'm just going to say I, so that it has an index in there, but you could put whatever you wanted in there. And now we close that. Okay, I'm going to close this for loop and close the onload event. Now the last thing we have to do is just to tell it to load our XML file, which is actually our PHP file. So I'm going to say the XML dot load, and then we give it our URL, and here I'm giving it the PHP file. Okay, and I close that. So now we're creating an XML object, and we're iterating through all of those item tags, and we're adding them to our list component. So let's go out and test this movie, and we should see it populated. Okay, here's our list component populated with our items from our database. So this is just one approach in how to integrate database content into Flash, but I personally find it the easiest approach. So it's basically we're doing all this stuff using PHP and MySQL, creating XML, so that Flash just has to worry about reading in and using XML, which it's really good at doing. So Flash doesn't actually even know that we're connecting to a database. So I hope this helps you in getting started.